Hi there, I'm Steve, the other half of the Bushman Brothers, and I'm taking part of the rhythm department of the Bushman Brothers, the underneath and keeping all things together. So what we're going to do today is I'm literally just going to go through all my junk and all my kit down in the cellar here where we record the drums. I'm going to talk about the microphones, the drum heads, the cymbals, what drums I use, how I like to tune the drums, what I play the drums with, a bit of everything really. So we'll start off by just running you through my drum kit. At the moment I'm playing all these new Gretsch drums, which I got from them about 2 years ago now. It's the new Gretsch Classic Custom, and they fantastic little kits. I used to have these old kits here that I played a lot. They were made in the 70s and 80s. These sort of square badge Gretsch kits. They're the ones after the round badge, and they're lovely kits, but they were a little bit less consistent in the bearing edges. These new ones are super consistent in the bearing edges. They've got a lovely warm tone with enough attack, so they're in between a sort of old sounding kit and a new sounding kit. Got a really nice look to them and a really light thin shell, which I like, the 6-ply shell. The die cast hoop on all the toms, which is fantastic. On the snare drum, I don't tend to use the Gretsch snare drums. There are some great ones, but I haven't personally got any, and I use a lot of different snare drums, which I shall take you through in a minute. The first one, in fact I'll take you straight through the first one, is a head snare drum. I'll take it off the stand for you so you can see it. This is just a head. It's like it's their metal snare, and it's a fantastic snare, and it sounds a bit like a Black Beauty, but I've done shoot-offs with Black Beauties, and in the studio I prefer this, a bit more sensitive and a little bit more open, even than some old Black Beauties. Did a session last year with a producer who had his favourite Black Beauty and brought it along and said he guarantees I'll use it on the session, and ended up using the older head drum again. I'm not endorsed by them or anything. I've got a good trade price on them. I phoned them up and the guy gave me a good deal. But a fantastic drum, paid for all these drums, and they are fantastic. This is a 13, I also got a 14-inch one. Now this is the 14, I've also got a 13. And all I use on the drum is real simple, tiny bit of moon gel even in the studio, unless I want a really dead sound, then I'll deaden it more. And the tuning tends to be top and bottom very similar. The thing that I think makes these drums sound particularly good is the rims on them. If you put a die cast rim on a drum, it seems to sound choked and very dead. You get a nice side stick, but it sounds really choked and really dead. These have got a sort of flanged hoop that's bent over, and they just give an amazing sound and real openness to the drum with a really nice side stick, and they don't, because of the angle of this rim, they don't chew your drumsticks. Brilliant. This bit of gaffer, by the way, is just on the side of the snare here, so it doesn't scratch the tom in the front. Right, going around the toms, sizes wise, so that's my main snare. It's just a metal snare, a 14 or a 13, depending on the sound I'm after and depending on the tuning I'm after. Tom wise, I tend to always these days use a 12 in front of me. I used to use a 10 a lot, and 8s and 10s. These days I like a big sound with a coated emperor on the top and a clear ambassador on the bottom. Again, the tuning depends on the track I'm playing, but they tend to be pretty similar, top head to bottom head, or bottom head tighter. Very rarely do I use the bottom head looser, because that gives you a real ring sound, a real sort of out of tune, doingy sound that I don't personally like. Floor tom in the studio I vary between a 16 and a 14, depending on what tone I want. If I want a big thumpy tone, I go for the 16. If I want a higher tone, I go for a 14. If I want a nice set of drums, a nice flow of toms, and I'll sometimes have a 10, 12, a 14 and a 16, depending if it's a rock track where I lead a lot of drums. But most of the time these days I'm down to a little kit like this, the 4-piece. Really enjoying playing the 4-piece. Sometimes augmented like in the studio here with a little small snare on the side. This is a little 10-inch snare. This is actually a cheapy Ludwig that I just picked up for about £60, and it's a great little snare. Tune it really high, and it's great for some jungle or bass and drum stuff, or where I want a really snappy, funky snare on the side and don't want to take an extra snare stand. It just clips onto the hi-hat stand here. I've also got another snare over here. That's a great little jungle snare, which I picked up in Australia last year. And this is a little Brady. And this is an old Brady from Australia, and it's a Jarrah snare, and that is a little beauty. Haven't been using it much. I've got to set it up a bit better, but that's a lovely little drum. Just needs a bit of work. Right, let's go back now. Bass drum. Bass drums, I've got 3 bass drums for this kit. I've got the 22, which I mainly use in the studio, which is a real big thunker. Gives you loads of bottom end, and you're not having to EQ a lot of artificial bottom end into the kick drum. Live, I'll tend to use a 20, or sometimes when I'm doing smaller gigs, and I'll take my small kit, I take this little baby here, Oh, I can pick him up. He's so small and he's so easy to get in the car. He's an 18 bass drum, and I have two heads on it, but with a tiny head in the front, so it's still got a lot of volume and a size to it. And the way I dampen this is very old style, with a piece of felt across the drum, which just takes the ring off the front head, and then in the back I've got a power stroke 4 with a flam slam head on, or one of these pads, and just a tiny bit of toweling in the bottom that just holds it open. Keeps the sound really open and not too dead. It's got a really nice open sound. So basically I'm trying to make this big drum. I'm really trying to make the big drum sound like little drums sound like a big drum. Inside I've got a mounting system you can see here, which has got a D1112 in, and it's got on that Kelly Shure. It's called a Kelly Shure system. I think it's a guy in the States who makes it. It's a great little system, and I just mount it in there so it stays permanently in the drum. And then I drill the drum and put an XLR connection there, and you just put the jack straight into the drum, and it just gives you a huge sound out of this little jazz drum. Obviously if I was doing a jazz gig I wouldn't have a hole in the front head and I'd tune the drum high and really boingy, but for rock, most gigs you'll see me, I'll be playing this tiny little drum. I can literally put this drum with all my other cases, bar my stands case and my cymbal case, and carry my whole kit and just walk down the road with it, which is incredible, and then just go back to the car to get my stands case. So that is a great little gigging bit of kit, that little 18-inch bass drum. It's one of my favourites. I always had the idea of making it work. Wasn't sure whether it would work, but somehow we got it to work, which was fantastic. Let's go through a few snare drums. Really into snare drums. Got quite a collection of them. I'll just show you a couple. Another one of my little favourites is in this box here, in these bags, which I've just converted to about a year ago. They're what are they called? They're called racket. What are they called again? Protection racket. That's it. This little logo here. This little funky chap. Protection racket cases. The guy there also serves. He's a lovely guy. And yeah, tried his cases and were blown away by them. They're just soft padded inside. Used to use those blonde cases up there and those hard looking type ones. But they scratch everything up. They scratch your drums up. I didn't really enjoy them. Went over to these soft cases and they're great. You can just stack loads of them together. Really easy to handle. Here's another one of my favourite snares. If I want a more warm sounding tone, I go to this wooden snare. Oh, it's got some dirt in it. Some needs a clean. The dust in it, the alcohol, isn't it? It's like a shaker. This is in a head snare, and this is again, it's another snare that's made very much like the Brady snares, where it's lots of staves of wood that are all put together. It's not a ply snare that's put together, it's all staves of wood. But unlike the Brady, which is a very thick shell and gives you quite a dead sort of twacky sound, this rings and is much more open, because what they've done is where the bearing edge and all the way in, they've sculpted out, and it gives a very resonant drum. I seem to believe now that light snare drums give you the best sound. In fact, most light drums seem to sound best and the most open and most resonant. Another drum that I like that's also a very open drum, again a wood one if I want a warmer tone and the metal's too abrasive for the track, is this one here, which is one of the Dunnett snares, which is oh god, we got everything falling out, which is a great snare drum again a very simple thin shell. It's a stave shell again as well, but super thin. I'm really enjoying the thin light drums. These drums weigh absolutely nothing. I just dropped that one on the floor there. In fact, it looks like it matches that kit, but it's a totally different manufacturer. Right, let's move these drum heads. Yeah, all my stuff falling as normal. Right, I'll pop that there. So that's basically some of my snare drums. I've got a few others, older ones that are real heavy stuff, but don't tend to use them anymore because they seem to me very choked, especially the ones with the die-cast hoops. Drum hardware wise, I've gone really simple these days. I used to be on all this sort of racking gear. I used to have these big rock kits on these big racks, still got a few lying around. Don't use them anymore. Use all Gibraltar gear, scrapped using all the racks. Not enjoying the whole big kit, the look of it, or the feel of it, or the lugging of it. It was great in my earlier days when I had hair on my head and I had a roadie carrying these are some of my old flight cases here. These old flight cases used to take my drums, and I had a guy doing all my drums for me and looking after my kit. These days, I tend to be doing a lot of the lugging myself, so I've gone to the soft cases, no racks, smaller kits, And to be honest, I'd never even return, even if I had a cavalry of people taking my gear around for me. I'd stay on the soft cases and a small kit, because I'm just getting much more creative and enjoying the smaller kits more. The feel of them, the look of them, everything about them. So that's basically my drums, some of my hardware. Well, the rest of the hardware is very straightforward. It's just Gibraltar hardware, a mixture of it. In fact, on this studio kit, there's even some old Remo stands that I used to get from Gary down at Remo back in the day when I was doing clinics for Remo. And yeah, some of them are still surviving even 20 years later. Some of my old stands are still in the studio. Gigging wise, it's all very light Gibraltar stuff. No heavy stuff anymore, except for a heavy hi-hat stand, because I don't like that to travel on one of the protection racket mats which I use, which with Velcro and all the pedals and everything sticks great to the mat, and the kit doesn't move. I hate a kit when I'm playing that's moving. I don't want to be chasing my kit around the floor when I'm playing. I just want it to be stable, so my seat's good and the balance is good. Besides snare drums, I've also got cymbals, obviously. Cymbals, I've been with Sabian now for 25 years plus, since I was 18. Maybe even longer now when I think about it. It's a long, long time. And I love their equipment. I got some of the very earliest cymbals that Sabian ever brought into England when they had the old place in London under the railway bridge there. And you used to just hear trains going over, trying to hear cymbals, and you had more train noise and cymbal noises, and you're trying to choose the cymbals. It's before they moved into where they are now up in London by the rehearsal rooms. But I've really changed my taste in cymbals. I used to use small, bright cymbals when crashes. I wanted them splash and just to explode and disappear. Rides, I used to use heavy, thick AA type rides. I don't know if I've got any